What does it mean to hold influence over others? Today, we'll uncover why leadership and influence come with profound responsibility and how to honor that role with integrity. You are listening to the new Ashla Podcast. Hello and welcome to the new Ashla Podcast. Today we continue the series inspired by the book, The Light Within, A Journey Through the Axioms of Ashla. I'm your host and author of The Light Within, Justin Gates. I am joined by my co-host, Michael Perry. So the axiom we'll be discussing today is, a position of influence is a position of responsibility. With great power must also come great responsibility.
Ain't it the truth?
I had to throw that in there. That says it all. All right,
Yeah.
Goodbye, guys. We just did the whole show. I'm just kidding. This axiom reminds us that influence is not just about power or recognition. It's about serving others and leading with accountability. A position of influence is a call to act responsibly and inspire positive change. So, what about this axiom? I know you just said that it's so true, because it is. It should be obvious, but unfortunately, it's not. I think everyone listening to this and the two of us can recall many instances where people who were in positions of influence or managers at a place really didn't act very responsibly or didn't take their role very seriously.
Oh, it's horrible out there. I mean, you see so many people get appointed in leadership because of their tyrannical nature. So a lot of higher management thinks they're going to rule with an iron fist. They're going to keep the workers in line. That's the management I need. And you see a lot of people take that scapegoat in a lot of big companies. But true leadership that impacts change in a workplace, that creates an environment that is both effective, efficient, and a place of growth, are those leaders that are people who act in alignment with what they hold their employees to do, who value their employees just as much as they value their position. And that doesn't mean that they don't hold people accountable. That's one of the missing ingredients when you do see some of these people on the other side of the spectrum. But when you're in a position of power, you have responsibility not just to the business, but to your employees. I mean, I'm sure anyone listening can think of two different bosses they've had in their life. One is that tyrannical micromanaging over your shoulder and what the workplace felt like as an employee in that kind of environment compared to somewhere where they felt valued, where they were able to contribute to the workplace ideas or goals and be able to climb the ladder, so to say. It's night and day when it comes to those kind of positions.
Yeah.
The higher you up in the food chain, the more I've noticed that you have the ability to have a more lax job, and it's up to you to really utilize yourself to the fullest when you're given that much more freedom and responsibility. So I covered a lot right there, but this is a big one because a lot of people in power don't utilize their power responsibly.
Yes, and this extends, the workplace is an easy one to pick on, but this extends to any kind of leadership role.
Yeah.
When you have influence as a mentor, if you're the leader of the group, there's a lot of responsibility in that, because once somebody's established as having a role of influence, and leadership and influence, they're kind of different depending on the application. But just having influence over people, it is important to understand that there is responsibility. I did a little experiment this morning at work where I made the comment, I stated out loud that the farmer's name is Bingo and not the dog, which really started spinning eyeballs and brains. They just what? I
I
said,
just
yeah,
found that out recently too. Yeah.
right, right. But it's not true, because what I was doing, I was mixing two songs together. I was mixing the Bingo song and I was mixing Old MacDonald song together, right? And I was doing this on purpose. I was saying there was a farmer who had a dog and Bingo was his name. And then Bingo, Bingo, the song. And then I said, well, the dog's name can't be Bingo, because then there was a farmer who had a chicken and Bingo was his name. And I'm going through a few animals and I'm really stressing people's brains out. One person in my coworker group said, no, you're mixing up two songs. And they went to the internet and did some sleuthing and some investigating and corrected me. Now that's somebody, me in this example, I have influence because my word is good. my character is strong, and you can believe everything I say because I don't stray from that. I keep my promises and I do these things. So it was an interesting experiment because through the act of discernment, this coworker called me out and said, no, and I said, you're right. I was mixing two songs together. But, I was having my other coworkers going, man, he's right. No, I'm not right. I'm wrong. I was mixing two songs together.
Dude, I had
So,
someone just do that to me. I see how it is. You're a jackwagon.
but it
But
makes
to
the
your point,
point that a person with influence, I'm not even the leader of the office. I'm not the boss. I am, one of the people that work in the office. Yet I carry influence, and through that influence, I must be responsible. So, and we see this a lot on YouTube where people can be convinced of all kinds of weird stuff and harmful stuff because the person is influential, the person has clout, the person has charisma, whatever kind of influence they have, they can fool a lot of people. And for the last 8 years at least, probably more, we have this word fake news, or we have this word misinformation, and there's a lot of it.
yeah.
And we just go along with it because, well, this person, I know this guy, he's smart. He seems smart. He's charismatic, or she, her word is good. And
Well,
that's
it's not
where,
just that. I actually just wrote a paper in social psychology on this, and it's relational influences where more often than not, this person you're talking about, yes, it could be their charisma, it could be their demeanor and the way they present information. But a lot of times, and this is one of the biggest issues you see in politics nowadays, is most people don't do their own research. They have someone who knows a little more than them, gives them some feedback, and then they take that as gold because that person
right.
has that influence
But
and
that
they're not going to
that
go look up.
information could be just complete garbage. It could be untrue. So it's important for us, both as those in a position of power over others, to be responsible for that, to do the right thing, to be truthful in all your interactions. And it's also, there's some responsibility there for the receiver to go, you know what? Trust but verify.
Yes, yes. I know that's one of the biggest reasons I've sort of gotten away from politics is there was a lot of times I was looking into information when I got it, but I realized there was so much information coming at me, and it's like you don't want to believe anything until you have the information in front of you. And it was just like I had to dissociate a little bit because it's like I can't keep trying to digest all this information when it's coming from so many random sources and so much of it's conflicting. And it's like this isn't something I need to dedicate hours of my life to trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, but that responsibility still exists.
Yes.
If we are going to speak and try to convince others and try to guide others, so this is really important for me as a teacher, as a mentor, as a guide. I have an ethical and moral obligation to influence you and others in a wise, caring, truthful way, but I also have to ensure that everything's on the up and up. Even your feedback back to me, if I'm giving you a lesson and you say, well, yeah, but I heard this and this and this. And if some of that is untrue, it's my responsibility as your mentor, your guide, your teacher to correct that and show you why it's wrong, or point you in a direction that you must now use discernment and decide for yourself. Because what happens when we neglect this responsibility?
And depending on what it is and how impactful it is to your life, I mean, you look at gossip in the workplace is a great example. Think how much damage is done in so many places due to just hearsay and no one just going to the person and talking to them about what's going on in there.
But it can really be harmful in some horrible ways. Think about destructive cults. We could talk about the kinds of political tactics that are designed to separate us from each other and fight each other. That is a person who is not being very responsible with their influence, with their power.
And that's one of the hardest things nowadays when it comes to especially a lot of big figureheads is there is so much misinformation out there. There's also so much of the opposite type of information trying to promote these people. And it's like there's so much discernment that is required to sift through and find what is real to you. Because when you just take hearsay, I mean, one of the biggest issues we have within society now is people are so divided now that the only information they get are from people that share their perspectives. And that's well and fine and all as far as having non-argumentative conversations, but we need people to challenge our views and our understandings to help us reevaluate.
Yeah. And for those people to encourage you to act discerningly.
Yeah.
I do that all the time with you.
Yeah, there's times you'll take a stand on something that you normally wouldn't take a stand on just to see how I react and try to debate the
Yeah,
topic.
because I want to make sure. Yes, because this is the law of confusion. And because I don't want to just give you everything because you're not going to understand it the way I understand it.
But I think
You're
this is
not
an
going to see
important
that.
thing to touch on here. You brought up a key phrase here that was in my teachings. What is the law of confusion?
The law of confusion is basically where, yes, I could give you all the answers you asked me. I could, but I don't because I can describe a sunset for you, but you must experience it in order to truly understand what a sunset is. I can give you all the answers to all the questions, and I will give you some answers if they lead you to that exploration, that point of exploring, that point of where you are now figuring and finding this stuff out for yourself, because you will not grow. If I don't encourage you to seek finding your own knowledge, your own wisdom, your own understandings, then you will not grow within your path, within yourself, within our teachings, and there's just no point. I could just write a book for every answer that you have and just give it to you and say, here you go, you graduated.
Yeah, but to your point though, it's the retention won't be there until the person acknowledges the lesson. Because I know that was one of the big things for me. I remember you first taught me about the law of confusion, and it was a bit hard for me to wrap my head around. As I started working through my crap, things you
Right.
told me before that were great advice on working through that crap didn't make sense until I made it make sense for me.
Well, and it's kind of annoying, isn't it? Like
Oh
like
yeah, no, it's
hey, you're
frustrating as
teaching
hell.
me. Why won't you tell me the answer? I hear this every day in my house. My wife will ask me a question, a philosophical question, or a question spiritually, or a question about one of the axioms, and it drives her absolutely bonkers. Why won't you just give this to me? Because I need you to grow. And it's hard for me not to giggle anymore when I say that because to you or anyone else, because listen, I found much of this, what you would call wisdom, through exploration. Knowledge and wisdom are not the same things. One requires you to search and seek and explore. You take the knowledge and you apply it through your lens. You apply it through your circumstances. You apply it toward your trauma, toward the deeper needs, stuff that I can't experience from your perspective.
Well, it's like learning about samadhi, right? Have you ever heard of samadhi in a lot of the teachings you've gone down?
Tell us about that.
So I'm trying to think what faith it's based off of, but it's the whole process of separating ourselves from our ego,
Hmm.
the illusion of self. And there's this documentary series that I recommend anyone in the healing scene, spiritual journey to watch, and it's called Samadhi. And it's a three-part series, but it talks about constantly throughout it. Samadhi is something that you cannot articulate through words. There's nothing I can say that's going to be able to create the understanding of what samadhi is. It is something that can only be experienced through your own awareness.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think this ties into so much. It's one of the hardest parts of when you do work with people in the spiritual and healing community is that they're, especially when you have all these psychological blocks up that have kept you safe your whole life, all these parts and the shadow work. When things don't want to be exposed, it's like talking to someone and it's in a foreign language. And as much as the words come in, they understand it. There's paradigms that have to shift within the psyche for things to line up and make sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of again, it's one of the hardest parts of teaching this type of philosophy, especially to students and people who are new to it, is finding the way to articulate things in a way that allows them the space to put the blocks together themselves. Because you can't just hand them a completed puzzle because they'll look at it and be like, I don't know what I'm looking at.
Right. And well, and it's different for each student. It's different for
Yeah.
each recipient. I apply the law of confusion for each person differently because some people, for some subjects or some questions, are open to be guided. Others, I must push off the cliff and let them figure out how to get back. And it's not me being mean or trying to hoard knowledge over them or put them under my thumb. You are a witness and you could provide a testament to that's not how this works. It does sound that way, like, oh, law of confusion. I'm just going to hold this over you, and so you'll just have to do whatever I say. No, that's not how it is applied. And it's
Well, it's
applied
kind of like we
differently.
talked about in that conversation with Brenda the other day. And it's that when you're looking for a mentor, a teacher, when you're looking for coaches, when you're looking for those who are going to guide you on this journey, don't just jump on the first person you see. Get a feel for people's understanding. Because the way Justin explained things to me, as much as it took me a while for some things to click into place, his teaching style, his understandings matched my own paradigms in a way that I was able to mesh with the training really well. So, like you're saying, sort of pushing people off the cliff, it's more you're not in a place where what I teach you can benefit you or that you're receptive to what it is I'm trying to tell you. So,
Absolutely. Perfectly said.
someone who can, or get to a place where these teachings will align with you and your values and your own ideologies.
Yeah. And really, this philosophy that I teach, it's really the acquiring of the knowledge, the words, the meanings are a very small part of this. You must practice this. Practice, practice, practice. You must take these words and these feelings and these thoughts and these meanings out into the world that you live in. Each of us live sometimes seemingly in a whole different universe from each other because, again,
Yeah,
there's a lot of deeper things that go into making us who we are. And some of those are, like I said before, trauma, deeper needs, where you're born, ha-
your
uh,
belief system.
your belief systems. This isn't about changing you to follow me exactly the way I do. This is designed and it is taught in a way so that you can find your way through your life and enhance it with these things that we teach.
Yeah,
You know,
even being on the training path with you as long as I have. We work well on a podcast because we have a lot of this, we have a very shared understanding, but even then, our perspectives are so different. It's one of
yes.
the things that makes these conversations so great, is because it is two different perspectives giving their own understandings and articulating in a way that helps the listener see it from multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
No student will ever take on all the understandings of their teacher, nor will ever see the world exactly the way their teacher does.
And they shouldn't have to. That's not the point.
Yes.
At least that's not the point of my teachings because the world has one of me. And trust me, you guys don't need any more of me, you know? But I'm happy to provide the tools and I'm happy to provide the understandings in a way that gives you space to explore and run around the yard and play with these ideas and make them fit into your life and enhance your life with them.
Well, I think another key thing you brought up here, just before we get too far past it, is the lesson you learn, whether it's our teachings or someone else's. Always revisit the things that gained you wisdom at a later point, because if you're dedicated to self work and self awareness, a year from now, your understandings will be vastly different. But when you go back to this material, there'll be new depths to it. When I first started training with Justin, we went through every axiom, and every day, depending on how long it took, I would take an axiom. I'd have to write a little essay about it. And it was my understanding of it. Now, as we're re-going through these axioms, my perspective and perception of these axioms and the lessons within them have shifted. They are a growing philosophy because they are not just a doctrine of this is how you must live your life. This is an understanding that grows as you grow.
Yeah. And I think I said this on another episode, but I'll briefly say it again. I've had students after months of training with me come to me and say, I have found a new path. I have found a new teacher that's going to teach me this new path, this new philosophy. And I only simply have one question for them. Is this lead you to more true authenticity? If the answer is yes, then go with my blessing. I'm happy for you. I celebrate you found authenticity within yourself. It doesn't have to be my teachings. It doesn't have to be my temple or my order or whatever. The fact that I was able to at least help you find the decision that you had to make at that crossroad is cause for celebration. Even if the path that you're now going down is in direct conflict and direct foundational conflict with
Contrast. Yeah.
what I teach, I'm still happy for you. I still celebrate you because you did the thing that I was trying to do. I'm just trying to awaken your authenticity. It doesn't have to be with me though.
Really the root of all this.
But
Because
I
within
will
your
step away.
authenticity,
But I must also say real quick, but I will remove myself from that position of influence over you because I do not want to cause you spiritual and philosophical confusion.
I've seen you do it.
Right. And that is, to me, that's the best way, the true way to be a teacher, a mentor, a master, or whatever label you want to give them.
Yeah. And I think one thing to really take away, I mean, I know it seemed like we went down a rabbit hole there, but this ties right into the axiom. A position of influence is a position of responsibility. So whether you are looking for a mentor or you are a mentor, listen to these traits, listening to these values that are held within a position of leadership and respect. Because these are the things that help cultivate space to allow either you to grow or the people you are helping to grow. Because the more we let go of the reins of trying to force someone into change, the more they will change, the more they will prosper, and the more they will discover their own authenticity.
Exactly. It's a position of honor. It is a position of responsibility, though. And that position could be that responsibility could be very heavy. So I've turned away students over the years because I just wasn't able to carry that much weight for them. And I've had other students that have come to me and we've talked and are prospective students and I've said, you don't need me. You're doing well. You don't need me. I can't help you beyond where you're already beyond where I can help you at this time. So, and again, that is, we were talking about you were talking about red flags earlier. That's a big red flag. If somebody wants to, take advantage of people, they're seeking that power. They're seeking the influence over you. They're isolating you from other people. Michael shared with Brenda, he had expressed to her that early on when Michael and I were starting to work together and he was working through the axioms, he had taken on a mentor. And what did you tell her?
Well, I took on a life coach because I was trying to find other perspective to help me work on a lot of the work I was doing. Justin's lessons were great, but I wanted more perspective. And when I told Justin that I was working with someone else while I was working with him, he was completely welcome to it. It was, if this is someone who can help you on your journey and help you grow, then I'm thrilled that you're doing this. I hope you continue on with my training, but I'm glad that you're seeking wisdom where you can
Exactly.
and from good sources.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if this person that you were seeking coaching from was a bad person, they didn't again, it's not that a bad teacher for you wouldn't be someone who was teaching something in opposition of me. If that was your authentic path you had to walk at that moment, then so be it. But if there was someone like a cult leader or something who was trying to lure you in, I would have a problem with that. And I would
Yeah,
have no problem driving to their little compound and letting them know.
I respect that. And that's a good leader right there
Because I
because,
have to look out for you. I took on this responsibility. You took on the
yeah,
responsibility to do the best you can. I took on the responsibility to guide you and mentor you in the safest way possible. That doesn't mean I don't let you fall down and scrape your knee. That doesn't mean I don't let you stick your hand in the fire and learn the hard way sometimes, i.e., the law of confusion.
yeah.
However, I'm not going to let somebody harm you either, because if they do, then that's on me as your teacher.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it's like for anyone who's listening to this and is someone who has a mentor and a teacher, it's a lot of people who come to us, whether it's life coaching, spiritual counseling, whether it's guidance in life. A lot of people come during very dark periods of their life. And so a lot of students come in, they learn what they need to, they heal, they get past this obstacle in their life, and they go on their way. And that is something else that you run into a lot in this field. I was talking to my first coaching client I ever had. And when we first met, she was going through a really hard relationship. She was trying to figure out herself and where she stood and what was healthy. And as we worked through these issues, she got out of that relationship. We started working on personal development, of cultivating self-love skills, for lack of a better phrase, because that inner critic had complete control. And I'm not going to say her life has completely turned around, but life just keeps throwing things at her. But I hadn't talked to her in months. And today we touched base again after a long period of time. She's building her life up. She's got this job lined up that's aligned with her career goals. She's in a relationship now that is so much healthier than the one she had, but has its own little rocky bits. And she's told me about the things she learned from me. She's practiced in this relationship. And she was talking about how she's come so far and that she's still struggling with that inner critic. And it was great to sort of help pull her back and be like, but look at who you've become since I first met you. Look at you asserting boundaries, becoming independent where you're not relying on a relationship for your needs as far as financial or for validation. You're validating yourself, you're standing up for yourself. You may feel like you're only so far along on this journey. You may still struggle with up and down emotions, which is a part of this journey. But it's amazing watching people when you give them the space to grow, even if they end up leaving your teachings for a while, to watch how they just blossom into these beautiful people, how you see them evolving. And it's like the journey isn't over yet, but the progress within a year and a half is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Same goes for anyone looking to get into getting a life coach or someone to help counsel them through their issues. That's why it's so important to do this work, because you end up becoming a new person. You no longer are shackled by the things that once held you back. You become more authentic, which is exactly what she was doing. And I was so proud of her. So I had to share that.
No, I appreciate that. And that is in line with what we're talking about. I will share with you guys some of the original philosophy that I learned many moons ago. And the primary teacher was my master, my teacher, Derek Thompson. And this is what Derek taught in regards to teaching. Teaching is a most noble and rewarding path. It is a great responsibility and not without unseen perils. As a teacher, you will not rest easy when your students begin to grow anxious and seek to learn at a pace greater than that which you have set. And again, this depends on person to person. Impatience in the young is natural and at times a commendable trait in a student. However, it is an indication that the student is vulnerable and open to temptation. Yield without investment, fruits without labor, and advancement without effort are notices of scratch that. Just as you have learned at a slow pace, you must teach at a slow pace. Too much knowledge gathered quickly can confuse and corrupt even the most selfless and devout students. And this is where the law of confusion. This is where I say, yes, you've learned all this stuff. So what have you gained without me? What have you gained through your explorations? I'm not here to give you all the answers right now. Of course, I could, like I said, I could just write them all down. Here you go, you graduated. Good job. Your life is perfect now. It's not really how any of this works. You're here to grow. You're here to turn that knowledge that you've gained and that you've earned and that you've worked hard for and apply it. That's where you start to find wisdom. And Michael said earlier
Yeah.
about how we complement each other from these different perspectives because Michael's more analytical. Michael's more this equals this equals this. This is what I've learned
Yeah.
through study and through learning, and I've applied this knowledge, and this is where I'm at. Whereas I come from a more metaphysical, philosophical, spiritual lens. But they complement each other because both of those wisdoms were earned the right way. I earned the wisdom I have and that I share my way, my path, using the same teachings. And he has also earned his wisdom the right way by acquiring, applying. So that's why the law of confusion is important. That's why I don't just give people everything. That's why many times we'll do an episode and someone will write a comment or they'll send me a message and say, "Where's the rest?" I don't know. Where have you gone to look? Where have you gone to seek? I can point you in many different directions, but now it's your turn to grow with what you've learned.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I think another important point you brought up here is I think one of the most important skills you can have as a teacher is patience because some lessons will come quick, but some will take time. God, attachment. How long did it take me to learn that lesson?
However long it needed to take.
That, that is a great answer. That is a great answer to that.
It's the only answer, right? For as long as
Yeah.
it took you. All things in their due time.
And usually it's the ones this is just a theory at the moment, but it's like the ones that take the longest are honest, usually the most profound and most necessary lessons to learn.
Yeah. So continuing, those who come to learn have already made a decision to explore a new life. I did when I first came to this early on in my life. As a teacher, you must allow them to do this by challenging them thoroughly and completely. You must challenge their commitment and dedication, their knowledge, skill, and ability, and you must challenge their nature and character. Yet a failed student is not entirely a bad thing.
Student is the best teacher.
Failed doesn't always mean failed, done, finito. As we've discussed in other episodes, failure isn't necessarily a bad thing. If a highly focused, committed, and engaging student in the course of study and practice discovers that our path is not for them and that a former or alternate path is, then they have not failed training, but succeeded in discovering a truth about who they are. That's what we do. I just shared a story about students that I've had that did that very thing.
Yeah.
And here's where things get a little sticky. And I think we're starting to get off topic here a little bit, but I'll bring us back. So just hang with me here. There are things that each of us bring as both a teacher and a student, especially things like cultural definitions of right or wrong, good and evil, things like that. But within our teachings, they do not. Allowing, facilitating, or requiring a student to endure or commit dark or evil acts in the course of their studies is unacceptable. So there are, I said I give my students room to grow and to play and to practice and to explore. But there are some boundaries. And allowing a student to allowing or requiring, if one of my teachers, if one of my students who become teachers ever required a student to commit dark or evil acts, they're going to be in trouble. They better hope that I am dead, because we will have a big problem, right? So, and it doesn't matter if the student is fine with it. That's beside the point. If a notion or a concept or a method is not aligned with our philosophy while they are training under us, then that's one that should not be employed. Because a teacher has a very big responsibility here to not allow, as best they can, philosophical, spiritual confusion or corruption. They are looking up to us as a guide. They trust us. I've said before that oftentimes I see my role as their guide, their teacher, their mentor, and I apply my fatherly love to them, because I have to look out for them. I have to make sure, because they trust me. They look up to me. I must do the right thing always, because if I don't, then disaster can strike.
Yeah.
Because as a
Well,
teacher, we have the most tremendous responsibility, because that person came to learn from you, and you must be ready for that responsibility.
yeah. Well, and it's like we've talked about with shadow work about how important it is to have a guide as you do this type of self work. When you remove that safety net that's kept you safe your whole life, man, I tell you what, if you abandon someone in the middle of that kind of training
Mm.
and they're counting on you for that type of guidance, it can be catastrophic because
I would say it will
they,
be catastrophic, at least for a time, even if it's a small moment.
yeah. I remember when we first started working and I had already gotten into shadow work, and there were so many things that I'd articulated about myself without any, all I knew about shadow work was to find the knowledge without any real implementation strategies. And yeah, I got to a dark place real quick. That's when I reached out. I was like, hey, do you know anything about this? Because I need some wisdom. And I knew you were someone who had a lot of that.
It's it's a great responsibility, because your students will come to you because they trust your knowledge, they trust your wisdom, they trust your experience. And so they will believe that you will guide them and teach them properly, responsibly, with their best interest at heart. They will
Yeah.
listen to you and come to respect you, reply on your counsel, as you're talking about, as a teacher, a mentor, and yes, even something like a family member, like I just said. I
But I
love
think
my
this ties
students
back
as a
to how
father.
important it is. And just this is why it's so important to find a good mentor and a good teacher because I mean again you're jokingly talking about cults earlier. Well, this is exactly how these cults get their members. They get people who are in these dark places and warp their realities and warp their healing to a place where they become dependent on these organizations to feel whole, and it's dark and it's manipulative.
Look, in time, you'll become like a second mother or father or an older brother or sister to them, and they will love you as such. And that's even more responsibility for you. You
It's
will
so
have.
beautifully said, though. I know the coaching client I had talked to earlier, who was my first student. I refer to her as my little sister.
You will have a remarkable amount of say and influence in their lives. And therefore, you have an enormous responsibility to your students, to your adopted children, to your adopted siblings, however that dynamic plays out. Now, we're circling back to the law of confusion, and where our influence is important, because yes, we could just give them everything they're asking, or we could help them explore and grow. A good teacher always provides their students with what they need, never with what they want. Create exercises that specifically target all the aspects of their being, the things they need, the traumas they need to work through. And don't be afraid as a teacher, don't be afraid to get help, to reach out to other teachers or even professionals. Encourage that kind of stuff. Don't feel like you have to do and know everything.
Yeah, and that's a trap I think a lot of people fall in because we want when people look up to us for this type of guidance, it's easy to get caught up in I'm going to find an answer if I don't have it. But the quality of that answer is vital because doing a quick Google search can lead to some misinformation, like we were talking about earlier. If you don't know, ask because you can find someone who is very knowledgeable. There are people who are niched into any subcategory of that are experts in a field that you can draw knowledge from and help spread better wisdom to those who are looking for answers if you don't know. There is no shame. In fact, it's even being a better example when you can be like, I honestly don't know what the best approach to that is. I've never been confronted with that kind of issue or situation before. But let's do some digging and see if we can find you anything that can help.
Yeah.
Vulnerability. That also creates the good relationship. I mean, again, one of the key themes here is a good leader is someone who practices what they preach. And being an example is more important than any words you could give anybody because it's through that example do you cultivate that trust? Do you cultivate that ability to have a true connection with somebody? Because, I mean, again, my coaching client, she tells me all the time how she looks up to me. So I'm someone she that is the role model for who she wants to become. And it means a lot to me, but I know it's not lip service. I can tell by the actions and the work she's done on herself that it's genuine. She does take not just the words I tell her, but the behavior I'm on
Mhm.
and incorporates it into her own practices.
Yeah, that's another big red flag. Constant hypocrisy.
There are many people who will claim to know it all, but it's very few who not only walk the walk, but can accept this is the range of my knowledge.
Yeah, open and honest because they trust us. It's a very big, important role. And you know what? As the temple master, I would be suspicious if my students took on students of their own and never came to me for advice or never came to me with anything. I would start to get very suspicious because as a teacher myself, and I've been teaching this for nearly 20 years, I've gone to other masters, I've gone to other teachers, and I've gone to other places and sought guidance myself. So I would be really, really suspicious, Michael, if you took on a student and you're 6 months into training together and you haven't come to me and said, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do. This is stressing me out. They're over there doing something weird and I don't know how to deal with it." I would be really suspicious because we all of us at the highest level, lowest level, wherever, we all from time to time need to seek guidance ourselves so that we can continue to be the best teachers we can be and honor that responsibility that our influence holds over somebody.
Yeah. I remember a couple months before we started this podcast, I had brought up the student I was working with and how, as she had progressed through her stuff, how she didn't really need the coaching that often anymore. It went from weekly sessions to every other month. And it was just like, is this something I should be concerned about? That's when you sort of to the lesson I brought up in this podcast is as people heal, a lot of people who come looking for mentors and teachers in the healing and spiritual community, it's because they're going through a life crisis. And a lot of the times, once they sort of get past what they're going through, overcome that worthy opponent in their life, do they sort of break away and start doing their own thing? Because that's how life goes. And it was a good aha moment for me because even when I went through my training, after I got through my darkness, after I went through everything I did, I too did a similar thing where I started sort of taking space to discover who I was and wasn't as involved in the training.
Right. And I would check on you from time to time just to make sure you're good.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, our teachings bring to the surface on how a position of influence is not about control. And there's several other axioms for that.
Yeah, there is.
But it's about service. It's about guidance. It's about fostering and awakening that growth in others. And we're going to get them growing strong and beautiful through their exploration. Our guidance, our
Yeah.
tools, but the exploration and the growing has to come from within them. And it's our job to bring that out. And if they get to a point where they don't need us as much, don't take it personal. Even when somebody leaves the path and leaves the training, if they truly are finding their authentic self in that process, that is amazing. So, again, it's never about control, but it's about service, guidance, and loving a person enough to let them grow authentic.
That's unconditional love right there.
It is unconditional love, and you have to have that for your students. And you know what? If you get halfway through training with someone and you just discover that you're not the right fit, then you have to admit that. You have to be able to let that go.
I
Any
bet a
last
lot of people
words?
get hung up there. I haven't hit that point yet, but I've only had a handful of people I've worked with. But yeah, letting go, to not have control is to be completely within the ebb and flow of all things and to allow things happen as they need to. There's many a time I always think about this a lot, how all I look at life as a tapestry and it's all woven threads. Everyone's woven in and over each other, events and everything. And some of the most profound moments of my life have been from random one off conversations with strangers.
Mm-hmm.
If you're someone who is new to a position of influence, be mindful of these teachings and know that this isn't something that, especially when you're new, like agreeing to being a person in influence, person in management, a person who is impacting the people around them from a position of power. Meet yourself where you're at. Watch yourself. There are triggers, there are things that you're going to do unconsciously because whenever you learn something new, I always look at it as an infant learning to crawl than to walk. Work with yourself where you're at. Take what we've had to say about what makes a good leader and evaluate where are the areas you struggle. And it doesn't mean now that you know it's over, but practice, practice, practice. These are skills that are cultivated and not awareness you gain, and you're just a new person doing this.
Well said. Our exercise for today, we're going to call the influence audit. Reflect on areas of your life where you hold influence. And each of us out there hold some influence over something or some person. At work, in your family, in your community, I want you to ask yourself, am I using this influence to inspire, guide, and serve? Identify one specific way you can use your influence more responsibly and put it into action. This exercise is about creating some more awareness around what you're doing in life, what you're doing out in the world within your sphere of influence. We need a lot of awareness so that we can constantly be growing ourselves and getting a little better each day.
That's a good reflection right there.
Our affirmation for the day: I honor my position of influence by leading with integrity, compassion, and responsibility. I use my influence to uplift and inspire those around me. Our journaling prompt: reflect on a time when you influenced someone's decision or perspective. Was your influence positive and responsible? And how can you continue to grow as a responsible leader or influencer? Our listener question for the day: what does responsible influence mean to you? Share a story about how someone's influence positively shaped your life or how you've used your influence to help others with #responsible influence. So I'm going to leave you, my friends, with a reading of this axiom from the book. With great power must also come great responsibility. Consider the weight of influence. It is not a mere privilege, but a profound responsibility. When you occupy a position of influence, whether by virtue of your role or the impact of your actions, you become a steward of the lives and well-being of others. It is a role that demands not only competence, but also integrity and empathy. To wield influence without a sense of responsibility is to risk causing harm rather than fostering growth and positive change. Teaching and mentoring is a noble and rewarding path, but not without its unseen perils. Those who come to learn have already made a decision to explore a new life. And as a teacher, you must allow them to do this by challenging them thoroughly and completely. You must challenge their commitment and dedication, their knowledge, skill, and ability, and you must challenge their nature and character. Some will pass and complete training, and others will not. But you as a teacher have a tremendous responsibility. Someone has come to learn from you. They will trust your knowledge, wisdom, experience, and so they will believe that you will guide and teach them properly, responsibly. They will listen to you and come to respect you, rely upon your counsel as a teacher, as a mentor, and yes, even as a family member. In time, you will become like a second mother or father, an older brother or sister to them, for they will honor you as such. You will have a remarkable amount of say and influence in their lives, and you owe your students nothing short of your very best at all times. Thank you so much for joining us. We love you guys very much. With love and gratitude, ad lucem.
Ad Lucium.